So I understand you know Captain Joy Manthey, huh?
Oh yeah, I know Miss Joy well. We were down at in New Orleans the other day, or last week I believe it was, doing a Riverworks Discovery event, and we get to meet doing those events and everything, which we really enjoy doing the outreach for the high school students in New Orleans area, right? And so we're always, it was a rain day, so we got moved underneath where the cruise terminals are, so everything gets swapped up at the last minute, and we're running around, taking care of our business. We have the rig in there and doing the thing. When she comes around to me at the end, she's like, "Hey, there's going to be a hot wash, meet down here." I said, "Excuse me?" And she said, "There's a hot wash." I was like, "Okay, what's a hot wash?" And do you know what a hot wash is, Tim? Yeah. Okay. Well, good, because she can see this. But I was like, I didn't know what a hot wash. She's like, "You of all people don't know what a hot wash is." I said, "No, ma'am, I don't know what a hot wash is. What are you talking about?" And it blew her mind that I did not know what a hot wash was. And she's like, "Everybody here but you." And so it was a funny joke. We would go around to everybody like, "What's a hot wash?" Well, a hot wash is a meeting after doing something. It's like so yeah. So when you get done doing something, it's the meeting afterwards. Um, you know, it's called a hot wash. And well, I learned that. I said, "Well, Miss Joy, I'm good for the day. I've learned something new, and I can just shut down." But that was really funny. She was hilarious, dude. She was hilarious. She gave me hell about not knowing what a hot wash was. But yeah, she's absolutely great, man. Real professional, and we enjoy being around her.
Welcome back to Between the Levees. I'm joined today by Captain Joy Manthey, a freelance trip pilot that's been everywhere and done everything I can imagine to even ask. I don't know where to start with her story, and I have no idea where this conversation will end, but Captain Joy, thank you for joining me on Between the Levees.
Thank you, Tim, for having me.
Well, all these usually begin by where were you born? What did your parents do? How many siblings did you have? And all that stuff. And we'll get into that. But tell me first, um, in your chaplaincy roles, you recently were on a training ship from Hawaii to California. Tell me about that experience.
Well, it was very interesting. It was the SUNY maritime cadets from State University of New York who lost their ship when MORAD took it to dismantle it and to scrap it before the new ship came out that was being built. So they went to the Golden Bear, which is a Cal State University maritime ship, and went from Vallejo, California to Honolulu, and I boarded it in Honolulu as a chaplain, and went from Honolulu to San Diego and then back to Vallejo. So we had about a couple of hundred cadets on board, and some of the merchant mariners who teach the cadets, as well as some of the instructors and teachers from the university. So it was my first really blue water trip, and it was very interesting. I enjoyed it.
You mentioned to me before that I think you had taken up some cadets to the bridge for the first time. Is that correct?
Some of the engine room cadets had gone up there. I had really never been in an engine room on a large ship while it was underway, and so I kept telling the third engineer that I wanted to go, and then I went to the chief engineer and asked him if he would show me the engine room. And so he sent me to the first, and I went to the first, and he thought I was joking, but I really, really wanted to see the inside, the engine room when it was underway. And so I had one of the cadets, Mr. Dumdroff, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. He showed me around, and he did an excellent job. And he was only a freshman. I get the numbers mixed up, whether that's 4-year, class 4, class 1. But he was a freshman finishing up his freshman year at SUNY. And he did an excellent job of showing me the engine room. The poor fellow, I kept asking so many questions. He had missed his, getting off time like by 45 minutes. And he finally said, "Well, ma'am, do you have any more questions? Because I need to get my dinner and lay down, to come back on watch in a little bit." And I said, "Oh, no, I'm so sorry. I didn't know that." And then he said he had been up on the bridge. So I said, "Well, look, I'm going to be up at the bridge. Come meet me up there tonight at 8 o'clock. So he came up, and I had to return the favor, and I had him steer the ship and hold the con, since he let me, show me all around the engine room. The biggest thing that I was amazed at on the ship in the engine room was that the shaft from the main engines, it was twin screw, but it went to one single shaft through a what do you call those gears? Certain kind of gear. I can't remember what you call that gear. where two engines go down into one into the shaft. The shaft was like 60 feet long. I was shocked to see that long of a shaft, but it was a great trip.
How different was that engine room to what you're used to?
No, it was very different. First of all, our shafts are not that, that long. And of course, our engines on even the 10.5s, horsepower towboats, are not that big. So it was quite different.
And what other jobs have you done in the meantime since we last spoke? I think you said some time on passenger vessels on the Ohio.
I have. I was actually delivering a brand new vessel from Lafitte in Crown Point, Louisiana, down to Tampa about 4 weeks ago, and that was an interesting trip. It's a very low, not low visibility, but it's very squatty, a very short boat vertically. And so it's going to run on the Hillsborough River in Tampa for a yacht storeship. And the name of the vessel is Capt. It's going to be serving craft food and craft drinks. And it's got a wood-fired grill on. It's going to be a very neat vessel. And we didn't have a radar on it. And we went, the Harvey Lock and the Algiers Lock were both closed. So we had to go down Bayou Barataria and then go east from Bayou Barataria past Grand Isle and then out to up to Baptiste Colette. And up to Venice, up to the Jump, and then Baptiste Colette, and then Chandelier Islands, up to Long Beach, and then head east. So it was an interesting trip with no radar. And then also all the deadhead wells out in the Gulf were really something. It's amazing and sickening that they have so many deadhead wells out there. They're, some of them still leaking, but a lot of them just out there. With no lights on, so it's just a navigation nightmare, especially without a radar. But it was an interesting trip. It was myself, my nephew, and my great nephew, who is 19 years old, who got his license just recently. So it was 3 generations of Manthey. So it was fun.
Anything stand out from the trip aside from those deadheads?
Yeah, when we got out in the Gulf, we were way out in the Gulf, and that was when that strong front came from the west, and we had pretty good waves, maybe 5-foot seas. The boat lane drew 3.5 foot, so it got a little hairy there, and it was interesting, but we made it. And I was trying to tell my great nephew Jack that we were so far out, we didn't have AM/FM radio. The watch before. We were listening to the radio and just having a good old time talking about his dad when his dad was younger, and talking about things that his father and I had both done, like tall stacks and bringing a boat up from Galveston to Cincinnati for tall stacks. I don't know, probably 20 years ago. And so they're going to be another tall stacks hopefully in a couple more years. So we'll get to be Troy, Jack, and I. Hopefully we'll get to do boats up there all at the same time. So it was an interesting trip. But when I was in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, luckily I got a call come through, and it was the folks up in Cincinnati. They needed a captain kind of in a hurry because it was October. They have lots of bus tours coming in, and their captains were all out. So they asked me how fast I could get there. So it was the next day till I got to Tampa, and then I got to Cincinnati that night and did 3 weeks up on a 1,600 passenger vessel in Cincinnati for Alan and Mary Bernstein BB riverboats, and that's always fun to be up there.
Anything especially memorable from your time up there?
Nope, they have a great crew, and I love working with the Bernsteins. They do a wonderful job with the dinner cruises and the lunch cruises, sightseeing cruises. They're just an A1 number excursion boat company, and just great people. The Bernsteins are great people to work for. I thoroughly enjoy being up there. It was the peak of fall foliage too, so that was perfect for me. And I enjoyed seeing fall foliage because we don't get to see too much of that down here.
Well, Captain Joy, your introduction to the industry is certainly different from the previous 100 guests I've hosted. We talked about this at dinner a few months back. You were born in New Orleans, I believe, to a family with 9 siblings?
Correct. I'm the 7th of 10 children. We have 5 boys and 5 girls in the family.
And at some point, your father began giving you each 50 cents a week, I believe, allowance. Is that accurate?
Correct.
And what exactly did you end up doing with that money?
Well, This is kind of really how my whole career started. I had a couple of guys who lived next door to me, Dale and Malter, and they would go on vacation to Florida for 2 weeks. We would only go for 1 week as a family, and we'd go to Pensacola. Later on in years, we always went to Gulf Hills, Dude Ranch, and Ocean Springs, Mississippi. But anyway, when we were younger, we'd go out, and wait for the bus to come, and the bus driver would stop, and we'd throw water balloons at him, and then we'd run. Of course, the water balloons never broke. We didn't know you had to put a little pinhole or something in them to get them to bust. And so when Dale and Malta went on vacation, I was out at the bus stop, and the bus driver stopped, and he opened up the door, and he said, "No water balloons today?" And I was like, "Oh no, I don't have any water balloons." And he said, "Well, you're going to get on?" And I said, "Well, how much is it?" He said, 10 cents. Well, I just got my 50 cents allowance that morning. It was a Monday, and I had my 2 quarters. And so I got on. So I rode the bus all the way from Lakeshore in New Orleans, about 7 miles down to Canal Street. We got to the end of Canal Street where the Rivergate, now Harris Casino is. And he told me I had to get off. And I was like, "Oh, no, I'm not getting off. I'm going back with you." And he said, "No, young lady, you need to get off, and you can go catch that bus right over there." And he pointed me to 3 buses away from me. And I was like, "Oh, no, I'm going back with you." And I didn't know it until really years later that he had to get off and go to the bathroom. And in New Orleans, at the end of Canal Street, they had these steps that went down. And I'm thinking to myself, well, you can't go down, in New Orleans, it's below, sea level. I mean, that's why we buried the dead above the ground. So I was really confused, but I found out years later, I asked one of the bus drivers one time, I said, "What do you do down there?" He said, "So that's where we go to the bathroom." So anyway, the poor guy had to get him to go to the bathroom. So he told me he'd be leaving in 15 or 20 minutes. And so I went exploring. I mean, I was 10 years old, and I went exploring and ended up going up to the foot of Canal Street. And they had this big old boat called the President, the steamer President. And they had these 2 young girls playing. And I started playing with them. And one of them said, "Do you want to, go on a boat ride?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." So completely forgot about going back on the bus in my 15, 20-minute allotment of time, and got on this boat called the steamer President. And so they said, "We'll get you on the boat if you clean the popcorn machine." So I cleaned the popcorn machine, and I had to stand on a milk crate and a chair almost to clean the popcorn machine, and started going back every day, and they got me on the boat for free if I cleaned the machine. So when Dale and Malta came back in 2 weeks' time, they came over looking for me, and my dad said, "Hey, Dale and Malta came over. Where were you?" I said, "Oh, Daddy, I got me a job." And he said, "You got a job? Where you have a job at?" I said, "Oh, Daddy, I'm working on this boat called the Steamer President." And so, he says, "Well, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I clean the popcorn machine, and I clean ashtrays and bus tables and pick up trays." He says, "Well, how are you getting back and forth every day?" I said, "Oh, Daddy, I get paid 50 cents a day." So how that came about is that I didn't get to see my little friends there, and they asked me what happened. I said, "Well, I didn't have any car fare." And so one of them's father was the captain, Captain RM. And so he would reach in his pocket every day when I told him, "Thank you for letting me ride the boat." He'd reach in his pocket and give me 50 cents. Well, he lived in Jefferson Parish, and car fare was a quarter each way. In Orleans Parish, was only 10 cents each way. So I was making 30 cents a day profit, which was really nice because that was 3 Hershey bars with candy bars, with 3 Hershey bars with almonds, or 3 games of pinball. So I was, doing pretty well, making 30 cents a day. So when Dale and Malta came back, and my daddy, wanted to know about this job, and I told him what I was doing. He said, "Tomorrow, when you go down to that boat, you tell Captain RM that you Joy Manthey, Ed Manthey's daughter." I said, "Okay, Dad, I'll do that." So I went down the next day and told him that. I didn't even know that. Captain RM was my 3rd cousin. My daddy grew up working on the boats, didn't know any of this stuff when I was 10 years old. And his grandmother was one of the original Streckfusses of the 7 children in the Streckfus family. So it was, I was, I'm fourth generation Streckfus, and we're one of the oldest excursion boat families, on the inland waterway system.
You said your father grew up on boats?
No, not really. I mean, he worked when he was in college on boats. He went to St. Louis University and worked on the boats in St. Louis during his college years. But then he, had his own businesses. He actually had liquor stores in New Orleans, and like a check cashing business. Before check cashing businesses were big, he actually did check cashing at the liquor stores. And they were, all over New Orleans.
Tell me about the steamer President and your 10-year-old eyes getting on board for the first time.
Well, I mean, I didn't know anything about boats. I didn't know anything about anything. But I know I got to eat popcorn, and that was great. All the popcorn I could eat, and bus tables. And I mean, I worked probably harder then than I did when I started getting paid, by the hour. And I just really loved it. And then there was a small boat called the Mark Twain that tied up on the outside of the President. And so that went on the original Bayou cruise. It was a 5-hour Bayou cruise, left at 11 and came back at 4 every day. And it went down to Lafitte, to Charlie Hooper's place. And so that's where they'd show us the soft shell crabs and the nutria rats and the alligators and nutrias. So the little girl who got me to ride the boat to begin with asked me, she was this ticket seller for the Mark Twain. And she asked me one day if I wanted to go on the Mark Twain. So I did. And so when the boat turned around in Lafitte to come back, the captain would eat his lunch then. So he asked me if I wanted to steer the boat. His name was Captain Samuel Centenny. And so he taught me how to steer the boat. He had a big wheel. I couldn't even see over the wheel. I had to stand on a steel milk crate to see over the wheel. But he taught me how to steer the boat, and I kept her steady. And one time he went down to go to the restroom, and he left me up there by myself. And we were coming on the old Crown Point swing bridge, and I didn't know he was behind me, but he was behind me. But I was scared to death because I had to go through that swing bridge, and there was a Dixie boat coming towards me on the other side of the swing bridge. And that was probably my first scary moment of steering a boat. And I don't know if I've ever gotten used to bridges since then.
What kind of horsepower would those boats have been?
The Mark Twain was like 400. They had 2 Caterpillars, D311s and D311s, 30. Oh man, whew, that goes back to the 70s. I can't remember, but it was about 400 horsepower. They were built up in Dubuque. Actually, my great grandfather did the plans for the boats. There were 400 passengers on those boats, and they originally built 5 of them. And then at Dubuque Boat and Boiler, and then we had 3 operating in St. Louis, and we had 2 operating here in New Orleans.
Well, what was aside from those events, what was your childhood, being the 7th of 10 children growing up in New Orleans? We were all over the place all the time. We just had to be home when the street lights came on at 6 o'clock and the church bells rang. They happened simultaneously, and we better be at the dinner table 1 or 2 minutes after 6. We all sat down and ate together, all 12 of us. Barely a night went by that we didn't have a spilt milk or something at the table. But yeah, they were good times. I mean, enjoyed. And then we'd get up, and my dad and mom would talk at the table, and we'd go do our homework. And every now and then, if we were cutting up or beating one another up or wrestling or something, we'd hear the table chair scrape. We knew my dad was getting up, and it'd say something about he was going to get the alligator, which meant the alligator belt. And we all kind of like ran. Whoever he caught is the one he caught. So it was, we had a great upbringing. I mean, I had a great childhood, but I was really never at home, because from the summer of 4th grade going into 5th grade, I was on the boat. Every holiday I was on the boat. Every weekend I was on the boat. And I would be up and at the bus stop for maybe 7:15 in the morning, and I wouldn't get home till 6 o'clock, on Saturday and Sundays. And then during the summertime, I'd go straight to play ball. I'd take the bus straight to ball after work. So, I was hardly never home once I started going to the boats the summer before 5th grade. So, and that's really how I kind of got started in 5th grade. The first week of school, what do you want to do when you grow up? The teacher was trying to learn a little bit about us, and I wanted to be a riverboat pilot, because I'd already started steering the boat, the Mark Twain, back in the canal and in the bayous. And she made me erase it. She told me I could not be a river pilot, that I could either be a teacher or a nurse. And I thought to myself,
I don't know if I'm gonna be any nurse, you know, they used to wear those white outfits and those white hats and those white shoes that had heels on them. And I thought to myself, I'll look like a side-by-side icebox coming down the hallway. So I said, well, I guess maybe I'll be a teacher, but nobody wanted me teaching their kids, that's for sure. So I got my first license despite my dear old 5th grade teacher, Miss Salisbury. So I was very happy when I got my license. You know, I went back and told her that I got my license, and she could call me Captain Joy now. So it was fun going back to my grade school, St. Pius X in New Orleans, and letting her know that I got a license.
How many years later would that have been?
During my senior year in high school, a couple of yep, 75, 76.
Okay. Well, what was the age difference from your oldest sibling to your youngest?
My oldest brother was born in 43, and my youngest brother was born in 64. So 44 to 64, 20 years, 19 years.
Yeah, indeed. Well, as per New Orleans tradition, may I ask where you went to high school?
Yes, I went to Mount Carmel Academy.
And as soon as you finished, did you go straight to work? You said you got your license when you were in your senior year, right?
I did, but I went to LSU, Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge. I was actually in a sorority, was sorority president, which a lot of people shake their heads just thinking that I was in a sorority, and also I was a sorority president, but I was. And then years later, I got my master's from Loyola University, New Orleans.
Where did you study at LSU and Loyola?
At LSU, I was studying social work, and they lost their accreditation. So I ended up just getting a degree in general studies. And then at Loyola, I got my master's in pastoral care and counseling.
Okay. And where did your life and career take you from that point?
Well, I worked on boats, the steamer President. I worked on all the way till 1980. January 6th, the President was sold from Structure Steamers to New Orleans Steamboat. And myself and my cousin, my third cousin, we bought our own little vessel from St. Louis, the Samuel Clemens. And for 20 years, we operated it in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, because we had a non-compete clause in New Orleans. So we operated Samuel Clemens till 2000. And then the casino boats were pretty much, embedded by then, and we lost a lot of our clientele. A lot of the social clubs didn't have the loose cash as they had before. And so we went ahead and sold that boat, and it went up and operated in Boston, Massachusetts. And it just got sold from being a passenger boat maybe 2 years ago. And now it's a construction guy bought it, and he's using it as an office and as a kind of like warehouse type thing. So, and also when we had the Samuel Clemens, I had gotten into the casino boat trade. So the steamer President had a second life as a casino boat, and it was one of the first casino boats that started operating on April 1st of 1991 is when the casino started coming into business. So,
well, before we get too far down that road, tell me about the Samuel Clemens and your acquisition of it. How big was it? What did it cost you?
okay. I don't remember. We got an SBA loan for it, and to tell you the truth, I have no idea. I don't remember what it cost us. And then probably find it in my paperwork somewhere. It held 276 passengers, and we did 3 sightseeing trips a day. We also had dinner cruises, barbecue cruises, catfish cruises, crawfish cruises. And then we did a tremendous social club business in Baton Rouge. I mean, some days we'd have trips from 1 hour sightseeing cruises at 10, 12, and 2. And then we'd have a dinner cruise from 5:30 to 7:30, another dinner cruise like from 8 to 10. And then sometimes we'd have a late night social club cruise from 11 to 2 in the morning. And then we actually had some from 2:30 to 5:30 in the morning. So those were good days, very profitable days when we had trips like that.
How about some challenging days running that business?
I I don't remember too many challenging days. I guess when we had the fraternities and the sororities come on, those would be pretty tough trips. You know, not even our social clubs were bad. I mean, each person would come on with a half gallon of whiskey, and then I'll leave with empty bottles or no bottles. You know, they'd be scattered around the deck with DJs on board the boat. And I used to love those trips because we'd go up the river and I'd go all the way up in the Devil's Swamp, and I'd slowly go by Exxon because I knew a lot of the tankmen on the barges, and sometimes they'd be screaming at me to throw them something to eat. I'd throw them some hush puppies if it was a catfish cruise, or hot dogs and hamburgers. I mean, sometimes they saw me coming, they'd make the motion, throw me something to eat, and so those were good times. But going up in the Devil's Swamp and hearing the music reverberate between the willows, it was pretty, and it was pitch black up and down. People didn't know where we were at, what I was doing. They'd get a little worried, but it was always a fun part of the trip.
What were the dimensions of that vessel? I've been on Devil's Swamp, but it's a pretty tight squeeze if it's where I'm thinking of.
Yeah, it's right there, above Wilkinson Point, right above the old Baton Rouge Bridge. You can bring a couple of regulation barges up there, but the Samuel Clemens was 77 feet long and 25 or 32 feet wide. It didn't have a paddle wheel in the back. We built it off of a double rake barge. So, and we used to tie it up at Tri-G Marine, and we'd actually have to back up to it. Didn't have flanking rudders or anything. We'd have to back up to the barge and catch, our 2 cowls on the stern onto the Tri-G Marine barge. But Mr. Earl Guidry was very nice and allowed us to tie up there for, a good 20 years. So.
What was your experience with tugs and barges by that point?
Really none. The Smith tugs, which is now Crescent Towing and Salvage, or Crescent Towing, they used to tie up at Tri-G Marine, and every now and then I'd ride with them because I was trying to get to know the pilots, because I was running for the New Orleans Baton Rouge ship pilots, or trying to become a ship pilot back then. I mean, my goal in 5th grade was to become a ship pilot and a heavy tow pilot. And so I would start riding the tugboats with some of the guys. And then every Sunday afternoon, the ships would go from the general anchorage area up to the grain elevator. And so pretty much every Sunday I'd ride with one of the pilots, whoever had den duty in Baton Rouge, to get a little trip in. And sometimes they'd let me, do the con, or, give the orders to the helmsman on the foreign ships. So that was fun. I always wanted to get on a towboat. I really wanted to be a towboat pilot or a ship pilot. And so Tri-G Marine was a boat store, and the boats would come in there to get on their supplies and groceries, or sometimes they have work done. And every boat that came in to Tri-G Marine, I would ask them, please teach me how to towboat. I will sign a harmless clause, insurance clause, whatever it takes for me to sign, and you don't have to pay me a thing, and you can train me until your man says I'm ready to go. You don't pay me anything. I just want to learn how to towboat. And I mean, I asked that to every towboat. And when Scott Shotan boats would come in, they came in quite a bit to Tri-G Marine and tied up, and they would be tied up for a couple of days at a time. And so I got to know those guys real well. And I would beg and beg and beg, for a job. And then one time I was coming in and I had to back up. It was kind of windy day, and I had to back Samuel Clemens up to the barge, and I got off the barge, and this elderly gentleman was standing on the edge of the barge, and he said, "That was a nice job, young lady." And I said, "Oh, okay, well, thank you." And I just went in to see Tri-G. I think probably went in to get some groceries for the night cruise and hot sausage or something. And I said, "Mr. Guidry," I said, "who is that old man standing out there on the end of the barge?" And he said, "Well, that's Captain Scott Shotan." And I was like, "Oh my God, Captain Scott Shotan." And I got all excited, I mean, I heard about him so much and everything, but I had no idea that was him. And then of course I kind of got a little big headed because they told me I had done a nice job. And so, I kind of went by and I didn't say anything to him because then I was kind of nervous, that was Captain Scott. So anyway, they're the ones who gave me my first chance at towboat. Was Scott Shotan in 1996. I was senior captain on the Bella Baton Rouge Casino in Baton Rouge. And they called me and told me if I wanted to towboat, now was my chance, because they were so hard up for people, they would give me a chance to towboat after I've been asking for, let's see, 96, 80. So 16 years I've been asking for a job on a towboat. And so I took the job took a $70,000 cut in pay to go towboating. And I don't regret it at all. I always wanted to towboat. And I left a $100,000 a year job and took a $30,000 a year job to towboat, but don't regret it at all. And then they put me in line haul. First tow I was in line haul, and I got on in St. James and came up the river, and we were going down the Port Allen route, and I had no idea that there was a bridge, Gross State Bridge. I called my tankerman up and I was like, Tim, what is this? And he goes, that's the bridge. It's Gross State Bridge. I'm like, well, does it raise up? What does it do? What do I have to do? He goes, no, you got to get it to open. I couldn't get him on the radio. I had 1,000 feet of tow in front of me. It was very nerve wracking, my first towboat trip. But went from St. James to Houston and to Channelview, and loved towboating ever since.
And was that post Samuel Clemens?
No. That was the Riverside. Scott Chotan had all their boats named after racetracks, and so Scotty liked car racing, and all their boats were named after racetracks like the Pebble Beach, the Pocono, the Charlotte, the Daytona, the Watkins Glen, the Sebring, the Lime Rock, and the Riverside. The Riverside was the last boat. It was built up in Greenville, and it was a triple screw towboat, 1350 horsepower. Had rudders like barn doors. Good, great handling boat.
That trip down the Port Allen route, was that after you sold the Samuel Clemens?
No. We still had the Samuel Clemens till 2000, but when the casino boats came in '94, our business kind of dropped off, a little bit. You could go ride a casino boat for free. If the casino boats went out, we tried not to go out really, so people could come and go as they pleased. But we still did some charter business and some dinner cruise business.
You shared a story at dinner. I believe you had to get the Samuel Clemens up around Natchez, and you were having some trouble affording fuel.
Oh yeah. So in 96, no, before the casino boats, must have been 86. In 1986, we went to go up to Natchez for the spring pilgrimage, and so it's a big week in Natchez where the plantation homes are all open. A lot of tourists come through. So myself and my partner, Captain Strecker, thought we'd go up there and try a little bit of business in Natchez. And so the river came up. We went in December because we wanted to see it first in December, and that was a slow period for us. And the river came up in December, and it was going to take a lot of fuel for us to get up there. So I was trying to hitch a ride on a 36 barge tow, and so I kept calling all these boats when they were southbound coming through the harbor to ask them, if they think they could give me a ride going back up. And so one of the Marquette boats told me I could call Captain Ike Sullivan and see what he said, but he'd be the man to talk to. So I called Captain Ike, and he was so gracious. He said, yes, ma'am, young lady, you can put that boat in one of our tows, no problem. And just call him and tell him to call me. So that Sunday we were getting ready to leave, and the next big tow coming up was the John Paul Eckstein, the old John Paul Eckstein, not the new one. This was back in '86, and so we slapped it in tow, and this was during the pilot's watch. And so when we got up there, we finished tying the boat up real well, and we had already gone around Wilson Point. And I made my way up to the pilot house of the John Paul, and the captain said, "You think you can handle this tow?" So I don't know, but I've always wanted to do it. And so he sat me down, and I started steering the boat, and we went around Thomas Point, and then he goes, "Well, it looks like you know what you're doing." And I said, "Well, I don't know. It might be beginner's luck. I'm not sure if I know or not, but this is something I've always wanted to do." And she goes, "Well, I think you got it, young lady." And he left the pilot house. So I thought he was going downstairs to go to the bathroom. I mean, at this time, I didn't even know that they had, toilets up in the pilot house of the boats, because I'd never seen one in the pilot house before. So anyway, he goes downstairs. Well, he never comes back up. I'm going around Thomas Point. I don't even know the next point. I'd gone around all these points, and I didn't know where I was. I mean, I had a Army Corps of Engineers chart, you know, but I didn't. I mean, it wasn't even open. I mean, the pilot on there didn't need it. I mean, but I needed it. So anyway, I started looking at the chart, and I kind of started following it. And then when the captain came up, the captain kind of goes, "Who are you?" And I said, "I own that boat right there. And y'all are giving us a ride to Natchez." He says, "Well, where's," oh God, what was that man's name? Oh, I see his face in front of me. He was from Lake Providence, Louisiana. Oh my goodness, I thought I'd never forget that man's name. Anyway, I said, "Where's the pilot?" I said, "I don't know. He left a little while ago and he never came back up." So he said, "Okay." So then he left, he went down, and he didn't come back up till it started getting dark. And I mean, it was dark. I mean, to me, it was already dark, but he came back, you know, he came back much earlier than the pilot did. So I got to steer the boat all by myself. I always want to steer a 36-point tow, and I got to do it, but I surely didn't know what I was doing. I just got beginner's luck. It's the best way I can explain it, but it was fun.
Any more highlights to touch on your time on the canals back there?
No, I mean, I love running the canals. I mean, I love running anywhere. I mean, I'll run, you know, all the way down to Corpus. I've never been to Brownsville. I would have wished to have made one trip down to Brownsville, just one time, and probably without maybe with one little regulation and not 230s that were empty for sure. I mean, I've heard nothing but nightmares about the wind down there. But I've been on the intercoastal all the way from Corpus Christi to Florida, across the Okeechobee Waterway, and then up to Boston. So I've been a long ways. I went that way on an excursion boat. I did a trip from Nashville on one of the boats that used to work at Opryland. The not the Quad City Queen, was that boat called? The Music City Queen, and delivered it to Boston for the new owners. And it's the same owners who bought the Samuel Clemens. So that was a fun trip, and got to go across the Okeechobee Waterway, which was really a nice trip. You know, they didn't think we'd be able to make it across there. And I said, well, I told the owner, I said, well, if we don't make it, we lose a day and a half. If we do make it, we might save 30 or 40 days, depending on what the weather is down at the southern end of Florida. So it's worth a gamble to me. He said, well, yeah, let's try it. So the Corps of Engineers kept checking with them every day, and they said, it might be tight. You know, one area they're putting in cofferdams, and maybe tough area for you. So I went ahead and we went, and sure enough, I did, touch in right there where they were building the cofferdams. But it wasn't bad, so I backed up a good ways and came full ahead on it. And right when I had good sights on where I touched in at, so right before I got to that area, I took my engines out of gear, and she floated right over it. So it was a good move, and we were able to save. You know, I guess I was kind of dumb because I was getting paid by the day, but I was also trying to help the owner of the boat and get it to Boston as quick as he could. So that was a fun trip too. I love doing trips like that.
Well, let's start from when you sold the Samuel Clemens forward. So how your career shaped up. I know there was a stop in a convent. You were involved in ministry on the river, got involved with Seaman's Church. So there's a fair amount to cover there. But I guess take it from when the Samuel Clemens was sold.
Well, I sold the Samuel Clemens. So I started towboating in '96 for Scott Chotan, and only worked on the Samuel Clemens, when I was off of the riverside. And that was just doing the sightseeing trips and then the public night trips. And then we sold the Samuel Clemens in a little after 2000. I had entered the convent in 96 I started, and in 98 I got serious. I became a novice in 98. So I had to kind of start divesting my my ownership of things to get ready for my vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. So in 2000, I made my first vows as a sister of St. Joseph with the Congregation of St. Joseph in New Orleans. And the whole time I was studying to become a sister, I kept thinking, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to, be able to continue to work on the river? So every time we were looking in ARC House about anything, and the rivers were traveling on the Mississippi River from New Orleans to Grand Coteau or New Orleans to St. Louis. There's a big convent in St. Louis. I wrote that page number down and the booklet that it was in, because I was trying to think, okay, I got to be able to stay on the river some kind of way, because I mean, that's my life is the river. And so I was just trying to get loaded for bear, you know, to have all this down. So when it came time for me to have a ministry, I had been thinking, you know, what could I do on the river? So anyway, when I was on the riverside, in like 98, it was, I guess before then, you know, there weren't too many girls. Actually, there were no girls on the radio back then. And so, you know, I'd have all kind of comments, you know, on the radio from other guys. And then it was nice because a lot of the pilots would kind of come to my aid and say, well, if you could push half the toe she's pushing, you know, you'd be all right. So I wouldn't say anything until you see what she's pushing, you know, and I was pushing usually 1,186 feet of tow, 5 barges, line haul barges at that. So, you know, high-low couplings, you know, steering maybe, you know, three big ones off of an empty regulation and a loader regulation. I mean, it was crazy, but it was fun. And I had a great crew. I mean, my tankerman was a guy by the name of Tim, and he was just fantastic. I mean, he kept me out of trouble. He came up in going through a lock, you know, Calcasieu. He thought I had a little bit too much speed on. He'd say something very nicely, very easy, like, "Ooh, we got a little bit of a run going here," or something, you know. So he was just an excellent. I couldn't have asked for a better tankerman. He was just Tim Meggs. He was just a great guy, and kept me out of a lot of trouble and taught me a lot. But anyway, so we were on the riverside and we were tied up in Channel View, and I was still trying to figure out what I was going to do, and I made final vows if this, you know, sister was going to let me come out and work on the river. And this guy was sneaking around the outside of the boat. And so I thought to myself, what is this guy doing? So I told Tim, I said, watch this. So I went out the starboard side and went around through the engine room and came up behind him and kind of said, "Hey, can I help you?" And kind of scared him a little bit. He goes, no, I'm just looking at this fine boat. And so a lot of guys used to do that. They were coming to see whether there was a woman on the boat or it was a man with a squeaky voice. So anyway, I said, well, Capt, you want to come on in? I'll make a pot of coffee. So he came in and we were sitting down at the galley table talking, and, you know, he kind of started to tear up a little bit. And he was telling me it was his first trip back, that his wife and he were walking on the highway and a car came by and took his wife right out of his hand, and it was a hit and run accident, and killed his wife. And so, you know, he was telling me this. And so I started thinking, you know, these guys out here need somebody, you know, to talk to as a chaplain or, you know, as a minister. You know, a lot of times when the guys would get off the boat and go to their churches, you know, sometimes the parish priest would say, oh, well, look what the cat drug in, or something like that, not knowing that these guys worked, you know, moving the goods that we need in the world, you know, and they would come to church when they're, you know, maybe 15 days off. You know, they just don't, you know, most people just don't understand the river transportation business. And so I kind of thought it was just something that I could do, would become a chaplain to the guys that worked on the boats. And of course that would also feed my soul and allowing me to, you know, have my, you know, the rivers in my blood and allowing it to, you know, refreshing me and to keep me going. So anyway, so in 1996 or 98, the tall stacks was happening, and we were going up the river with the boat from Galveston, the Colonel, which is an 800 passenger vessel. And tall stacks is something that was happening every 4 to 6 years in Cincinnati, where all the passenger boats come from all over the United States. They'd come from St. Paul, they'd come from New Orleans. We'd bring the Colonel, which was the furthest distance from Galveston. They'd come from Pittsburgh, they'd come from Nashville, they'd come from Memphis. And they would all meet in Cincinnati for a big festival of trips and tours. And it was just a great time for the people, for bus tours. It was the #1 thing for the American Bus Association to do one year. It's just a great town for boat people, because all of us kind of grew up together. And even now, when the Bells Louisville had the 100th birthday, it was kind of like a mini tall stacks, and we all got together in Cincinnati, excuse me, in Louisville, which was a great time. And actually, they're talking about tall stacks again in 2025, so that'll be a great time to be on the river in the excursion boat business. But anyway, so I kept thinking that there was a ministry to the guys who worked on the boats. And so myself and my nephew Troy were bringing the colonel from Galveston up to Cincinnati, and we stopped in Paducah to get fuel. And it was at the same time I had just read an article in the Waterways Journal about this Seamen's Church having a simulator in Paducah that would simulate the eddies and the currents and the wind and all this on the river. And growing up at the foot of Canal Street, where the eddy changes every couple of seconds, minutes, I was like, there's no way in hell they can simulate the eddies at Canal Street or anywhere on the river below these points in the simulator. I mean, I was just like, there's just no way. I'm just full of disbelief. And so we stopped in Paducah just because I wanted to go see the simulator. And instead of taking on fuel in Memphis, we took it on in Paducah. So anyway, so I went across the street, and I knew Greg Menke. He had played the Calliope in several places, and so I kind of knew him and knew of him. So he showed me around, and at the same day, Reverend Gene Smith, who was the executive director of Seamen's Church, was in Paducah. And so I met with her and told her I was, information to be a sister, and that, I was with the colonel outside, and she was welcome to come over and look at it. But I was interested in continue to be a boat pilot and a towboat pilot, but I didn't know if the sisters were going to let me do that. And I was going to have to try to find some kind of ministry connected to the river. And so she said, well, look, when you make your vows and you're ready to go to work, give me a call, because I have something in mind. And so I said, okay. So I made vows in a year and a half later in January, and I called her the month before I made vows, and in January 16th of 2000. And she said, well, let me get my ducks in a row, see if we can get your salary, what would you require, and all this other stuff. So anyway, so I told her, and I called her after I made my vows around January 20th of 2000. And she said, we're starting a ministry to go along with our Center for Maritime Education. We're going to build one in Houston, and we'd like you to run in, the Gulf area and the Mississippi River area as a chaplain. So I was like, boy, that's exactly what I was hoping for, exactly what I was looking for. So that's how I got involved with Seamen's Church Institute, and I worked for them for 2000 to 2007. But I also continued to towboat as a trip pilot, so I could keep my license up. And I always worked at Christmas time, so a guy could be off, with his family and children. And then I usually came out and worked at around July 4th, because that's when the sisters let me work around Christmas and July 4th, so I could keep my license up. So I did that for about 7 years. And then went back to towboating when I decided that I wasn't going to make final vows with the congregation of St. Joseph, and went back to towboating full time.
And you're still involved with the congregation in some sense, are you not?
Yes, I am. I'm an associate. So I have, I would say I have my own vows, and I am with the sisters quite a bit as an associate.
Well, I think you said that was up until 2007.
Yes, in 2007 I came out and went back to towboating. I was still towboating, and also doing trip work on passenger boats.
Where were you running, and who for?
In 2007, I was working for one of the large petroleum companies. The Kirby Inland Marine had bought out Scott Chotan, and so I was working with them. And then I was working passenger boat wise up in Cincinnati and in the New Orleans Harbor and in Tampa.
Any highlights come to mind from that period in your life?
No, not really.
Well, where did your career take you thereafter?
Let's see, 2010. I still was still in the brown water industry, towboating, mostly working in the canals. Every now and then I got lucky and got to go out to the river. During high water, usually I'd come out in the river because I had the experience, but mostly the canals.
Well, you mentioned tall stacks a few times. Tell me about that event. And then you shared a story. I forget the details of it, but it was certainly worth capturing on this little conversation. I think you somehow managed some special permissions to get people on board at tall stacks. I think it was. Was it a haunted boat, maybe?
Oh, yeah, no, that was, oh, maybe it was when I was at the ferry landing and it was shut out fog, and I thought I was below the ferry, and when the fog cleared up, I was above the ferry, and I was playing chant music with the yellow lights, and my nephew said something about, Joy, former Green Jeans is going to come out from that house and see these yellow lights glowing in the background, and thinks he died with that chant music going. Was that it?
I don't think so. It might have been. It might not have been.
Haunted boats at tall stacks. I mean, we have big parties at tall stacks, and there's a haunted side wheel dredge that BB Riverboats operates every year. The USS Nightmare. Is that it? And they have to crew party at tall stacks.
That sounds more familiar.
Yeah, with Joe, Crazy Joe. The USS Nightmare is one of BB Riverboats haunted. I think they were the first to come out with a haunted house on an old side wheel steam dredge, and they call it the USS Nightmare. And when I was up there just a couple of weeks ago, I mean, you'd have lines blocks long to get on the USS Nightmare. Last time I went on it, we had not Who Works the Rivers, we had the Wemos group went on with Chad Panenke's waterway cleanup boat, and it must stay in around the Cincinnati River in October, because I saw it again my last few trips when I was in Cincinnati a couple of weeks ago. They were on the Cincinnati riverfront, but Wemos had a cleanup day, and we all went to do a cleanup, and then that night a couple of the Wemos members went on the USS Nightmare. It's a thrill. It's an unbelievable job that the Bernsteins do. And if you're ever in the Cincinnati area anytime in October, I mean, I think they actually started on weekends at the end of September. It's something to see. It's one of the best rated haunted houses in the United States, the USS Nightmare.
Any other highlights or especially interesting stories from your time in the Inland River system?
No, I was just very fortunate that I got a chance that I was hired on with Scott Shotan, and Arnie Rothstein gave me the chance, and I'm indebted to him for life, really, because I absolutely love towboating, and if I would have got my chance with Scott Shotan, I probably would have got on any towboats. I mean, the good thing is, Steve Hilarious with Kirby, who was Kirby Inland Marines president at one time. I think he had the forethought of bringing women out on the towboats. He's the one who started hiring maritime students and cadets in the brown water industry. And when they did that, Kirby brought on, 4 women, and 2 of them are still in the towing industry. And then since then, many more have come on board the vessels. But most guys will tell you, it kind of changes up the living on board the vessels. It seems like it's just more normal type of living, I guess. I don't know how to explain it, but I've never had any. It was almost kind of like when I look back and think about it, I mean, it was like perfect because, as a religious sister getting on the towboats, it was like the wives were kind of acceptable of that. I guess because I was a nun. I mean, I was kind of question what they thought. I mean, I was still a human being, but I was a religious sister. But anyway, it worked really well to slowly start getting women on board the vessels. And also as a chaplain, I was going from boat to boat to boat to boat. So you know, a lot of the crew members would have a female on board the boat, myself, and then they would be able to tell their wives, you know, hey, you know, oh yeah, Sister Joy's on the boat. Well, I guess they felt comfortable with Sister Joy being on the boat, and it was able to open up the doors for future women coming up behind me. So I think it was Steve Larris in his infinite wisdom, you know, mapped that out, so to speak. And I am just very appreciative to him for allowing me to, and to Arnie Rothstein really for getting me on a towboat, because I've had a wonderful, wonderful life. I love towboating, and I've been very, very fortunate, very blessed.
Well, tell me a little bit about your experience with Shotan. I've heard nothing but great things about that company, and that I'm not sure if it was you that told me, but that their boats were sort of a step above some others.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, Captain Scott, you know, first of all, Captain Scott Shotan, he was honored with at Seamen's Church at one of their earlier river bells. You know, he designed the 30,000 barrel barge, you know, we have today and we use today. His vessels were always top notch. They were very well built. They all had like the furniture was like built in. They had steam tables. They weren't like the big river tows. I mean, they all had steam tables, and they all had cooks. But these were canal boats, and they had cooks on board. Like the Riverside had a cook on board until Kirby bought it, and then they lost the cook. But Mr. Alfred got to go cook in the dorm in Houston or in Channelview. But so he didn't lose his job, so that was a good thing. Mr. Alfred made some great cinnamon rolls. But anyway, the Shotan boats, they will always look like they were a line boat. They were always very freshly painted. They always looked great with the red, white, and blue stripes. They on the inside had, you know, teak wood furniture, had steam tables, had the boiler plate in the zinc where you could throw crawfish in and boil crawfish right in, you know, in the kitchen, in the galley zinc. They were first class boats, no doubt. Yeah, they sure were.
Well,
Yeah.
Captain Joy, it seems we have a mutual friend that runs Callahan Marine Consulting that made these signs here for me. Tell me about meeting him, and I think you said you worked with his father to some degree as well.
I did. Back in 1984, I still was trying to get on a towboat, and I kept thinking, well, you know, if I get on with a big company, you know, eventually they'll put me up to the wheelhouse, you know, being a minority. And so in 1984, I went up to somewhere, some little bodunk town in Mississippi. It might have been Greenwood, I think it was. And it was Exxon used to hire their crew members, their tankmen and deckhands, out of hotels in little towns, you know, all up and down the river. So I think I made like a 7-hour drive, 6.5-hour drive to Greenwood, Mississippi, to a Holiday Inn to get hired on with Exxon. Now, I already had the Samuel Clemens, and Samuel Clemens was doing great, but I still was trying to get on a towboat. So I did get hired on, and the first vessel I went on, well, first of all, they sent us to the National River Academy for 2 weeks for tankerman training. So that was interesting. I don't think I've ever heard anybody on the show talk about the National River Academy. They were in Helena, Arkansas. And you went for 2 weeks, and they taught you how to splice line and throw a line. And I'll never forget, you know, I went out there when we were, you know, I heard and shovel my food in, and I'd go out to the line throwing pad, and I'd be throwing, I mean, 2-inch cotton lines, throwing them. I'd eat every meal, I'd eat real quick and then go out and throw lines to practice. You had to, I can't remember exactly what it was, but you had to make like 10 out of the 15 throws from 10 foot, 15 foot, 5 foot, 10 foot, and 15 foot, something like that. And believe me, my first day, I wasn't hitting anything. So I knew I was going to have to practice. And I was a good ball player, so I thought I'd eventually get it. But anyway, I'd shovel my food in and go out and start practicing. And oh my God, on the third day, I couldn't even pick up my fork to eat because my arm was so sore from throwing lines. And so I just had to rest it for a couple of days. And thank God back then I had anaprox naproxen, which was Aleve today, but back then you had to have a prescription for it. thank God I had some of that to take, because at least I could pick up my arm, after 3 days of resting it. But anyway, I won the award for most throws and accurate throws in that class. But anyway, that was National River Academy in 1986. It was in Helena, Arkansas. But anyway, it was a great place. They really need stuff like that today, to try to get some of these young people to come out and work on the towboats. But anyway, so in my class, Tim Callahan was also hired, and his dad was the chief engineer on the first boat that I got assigned to, which was the biggest boat that Exxon had, the Exxon Kentucky. And it was the flag vessel of Exxon. And it used to run with 12 barges between Baton Rouge, Exxon, and right below the bridges in Memphis, Tennessee. And so Tim's dad was the engineer, and the other one was Bob, Chief Bob. And I used to always have to change the oil with them, because I had a little experience changing oil in the Samuel Clemens, even though this is big difference, big engines. But I had no trouble with just grabbing the oil filters that, were this big, and just get oil all over me. But, I knew what I was doing, and they always asked for me to help them change the oil and stuff on the Exxon Kentucky, which I think, if I remember right, she was a 5,600 horsepower towboat. So, and then later on, Tim worked on the Exxon Kentucky, and also worked on other vessels. And then Tim went into the engine, followed his dad's footsteps, and became an engineer like his father, and then was also a port engineer for Kirby Inland Marine later on, when I was working in the office and working on the boats.
Well, thank you for that. When do you go back to work? What's next for you?
Right now, I don't have anything lined up. We have Who Works the Rivers with tomorrow and Friday. So that's all the Jefferson Parish schools, students coming from the Jefferson Parish schools one day, and then Orleans Parish schools the other day. And we're trying to get all these young high schoolers interested in realizing that there's jobs associated with the river industry, not just on the boats, but even on the cranes, the loading cranes, on the crew boats, in the office and payroll, in IT. Just let them know that there's so many jobs related to the river industry and how important the river industry is. So we're trying to get some young people to come out and work in our industry. So we have those at the Port of New Orleans on Wednesday and Friday. And right now I'm not lined up for any. I thought I had something about bringing a couple of boats down the river from up north before the locks get closed up, but I think we're gonna just go another way now. So not really sure what I have lined up right now, but I'll probably pick up something for around Thanksgiving, and definitely we'll go out at Christmas time. I always like to trip at Christmas to give a guy off, to be home with his family and his children. So I enjoy going out for the holidays.
Well, I hope you enjoy your break, and I'm glad your nerves didn't get the better of you this evening.
Well, thank you, Tim. I enjoyed, as always, listening to your podcast. And I would like to say this, and I hope that you don't edit it out, but what you're doing for the marine industry is fantastic. And that's why I wanted to come up and meet you in person and, take you and your wife out to dinner, because even when we have these Who Works the Rivers and kids want to ask more questions, or the students want to ask more questions, I'll tell them, hey, listen to Between the Levees. It's a podcast. You'll get an idea of the type of people that we have working out here, and also, what we do, the jobs that we do. And what you're doing with these podcasts and painting a picture for so many people who really know absolutely nothing about our industry is, worth everything in gold. I mean, and I'm sure many people in the marine industry, especially recruiters and stuff, owe you a debt of gratitude for what you're doing, and teaching others about our wonderful world in the maritime business. So thank you for what you do.
And thank you so much for being a part of it. We'll stay in touch.
All righty. Be careful and be safe. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
This has been a production of Where You At Studios, LLC.